George started his aquaculture career in 1975 as a researcher, instructor, extension specialist at Texas A&M. And I think we met the first time when he had a redfish conference down in Corpus Christi, which was a few years ago, right? So George served 25 years as president of the Global Seafood Alliance, now leads the Center for Responsible Seafood, a new improver program that leverages digital technology to help smallholder farms begin their sustainability journey to certification. So George, I'll turn it over to you, buddy.
Kevin, thank you so much. Great pleasure to be here. I've never attended one of the F3 meetings, but I've been following this mission of replacing fish meal and oil for a long, long time. Even when I started in the feed business in 1990 with Ralston Purina, heading their international aquaculture program, when I read the literature then, there was so much going on with fish meal and oil replacement. I'm just humbled to be speaking to this group because I think it's a very noble cause. And what I have to talk about today has nothing to do with work on nonprofit groups, which I'm very passionate about. It's a separate arm of my real job, working in the aquaculture business. And after 10 years with Ralston Purina and a little bit with Monsanto, I started my own aqua business, and I was always frustrated that at Purina we never had enough nutrition testing facilities. So in the business that I was involved in, breeding and grow out, processing, hatchery for shrimp, we always included a nutrition program. And what I want to speak to you today is some of the work that we did on replacing krill meal as internal research. This was all our own IP. But when I ended up selling my shares of the business to a genetics company, they had no interest in any of this, so it fell by the wayside. And so here it is. It's yours to use if you see any value in it. Okay, so first of all, I want to say that this whole idea of innovation is never quite so simple. I remember when I visited Wright Brothers monument in Kitty Hawk, I thought, what's the big deal? They built this thing and they launched it into the wind and they flew, right? Well, it turns out it wasn't that simple. They had these equations from some German pioneers. They didn't work. The plane didn't work. They had to do their own wind tunnel stuff. They had to develop their own model of lift, their own wing design. But that wasn't enough. Then they needed controls. Then they needed to design a propeller with that same kind of lift contour to pull the plane efficiently through the air. And then they had to develop their own engine made out of aluminum, a lightweight engine. So their innovation was four innovations. And so that's what we learn when we go down this innovation process. You think, oh, I'm going to do this one thing. And then you find out, whoa, it's more than one thing. So from my work in the feed business, I knew that krill worked extremely well, and we loved to use it, as much of it as we could. But we really didn't think we needed it for protein, amino acids. For one thing, we could breed the shrimp in our breeding program to select families that tolerate high levels of soybean meal. So you can use genetics to help you develop stocks that can use plant proteins. But it's the attractants. Nobody ever talks about the attractants. You can't formulate for attractants. In least cost formulation, you can put in the composition of the final feed that you want to produce. You can put in all your raw materials and their prices, and you can ask the least cost formulation system to solve the equation. What's the cheapest feed I can make that meets these criteria, except for attractants? You have to just put those in because nobody understands it. So we first studied the composition of krill meal, and we compared it to a bunch of other protein ingredients, some of which are very good attractants, like squid liver powder, squid liver powder is actually a hydrolysate of the viscera and fins of squid. But it turns out that what makes krill unique is a very high level of nucleotides and a very high level of small peptides. Very water soluble, they leach into the water. That serves as a long-range attractant for organisms like shrimp that feed by smell, and also a close-range palatant that when they touch it, it's like taste. They enjoy the taste. And then we started trying krill meal in feeds and measuring the consumption versus other kinds of proteins. And what we discovered is that the shrimp don't come to the krill meal feed faster. They stay on it longer. They eat more. That's the key. They keep eating and eating and eating twice as much as with other feed ingredients. So we found that they might feed, let's see, you can see here's another publication, and you can see on the right, time eating pellets without krill. A shrimp might stay on the feed 104 minutes. With krill, 231. And they can eat up to 14 pellets in a row with krill. So they just eat more. They don't find it faster, which is really, really important. And the first time we had ever heard of that. Then we sought ideas for how to replace those compounds that we analyzed in krill. We wanted to use the same naturally occurring molecules. We wanted to have an attractant component, long-range detection, palatability, and also one that stimulates growth. And we turned to this guy. His name is Charles Derby. Chuck, really super guy at Georgia State University. His whole career is on olfactory mechanisms in invertebrates. And he developed a bioassay system that we could never figure out ourselves. It's based on the number of times that shrimp grab at this emitter, which is that blue air stone. So you'll see, you can almost tell the moment that the extract is introduced in the aquarium, these quiescent shrimp smell it. There it is. And then they start grabbing. So the number of times that a shrimp grabs at that air stone over the course of 4 minutes is the score that this particular feed attractant mixture gets. And then you can run this quantitative assay with lots of different compounds, and you can compare it to krill meal. So that middle curve is the concentration-dependent attractant curve for krill meal extract. And the lower one is for our simplified mixture. Rather than 100 different compounds that are found in krill, we chose 13. And if you mix our feed attractant mixture with the krill extract, then you get that curve above it. So it heightens the response even more if you add the feed attractant mixture to a krill extract. And here's the list. So this was our proprietary secret. It's yours. This is not to say it's perfect, but this feed attractant mixture works. Well, sort of. Let's go on with the story. We added that feed attractant mixture, which works super well in that aquarium bioassay. We added it to feeds, and it didn't work. And then we scratched our heads and we did some tests, and we realized that those compounds are super soluble, and they leach right out. And so you put it in feed, and 2 or 3 minutes later, it's gone. And then, I don't know if you've ever seen this before, but a shrimp, its whole life is smell. It lives on the bottom of a very turbid environment. It can't see anything. It finds things by smell, and by probing the bottom, taste with its walking legs. And if you make a feed pellet and the attractants go out, it's like a piece of dirt. They'll walk right over it. They don't even notice it anymore. So we needed something to have a controlled release of the attractant over time. And what occurred to us also is that such a controlled release would be super valuable for any synthetic amino acids that you wish to add to shrimp feed or to other slow-moving aquaculture species, or to carp. You know, carp is the most farmed aquaculture species in the world, but they break the pellets up with their pharyngeal teeth in their mouth before they swallow, and a lot of water-soluble nutrients are lost. So a controlled release process could be very valuable. So we set about testing lots of different concepts, and it had to be a heat-stable material that repels water, food safe, and digestible. And we tested many different compounds. And the experimental design was to encapsulate 2 test leachates, the amino acid methionine or the amino acid lysine, and then to put the encapsulated material into a wafer of feed that was subjected to the same heat that a feed normally goes through, so that typical hydrogenated oils, which are very nice to use, won't work because they melt during the pelleting process and they leach away. So then we would put these test pellets in beakers and we would use HPLC to measure leaching rates. And we were fortunate to have this emeritus chemist who did maybe 90 of these trials testing different products. And he found that the best choice was de-oiled lecithin. De-oiled lecithin, it's a phospholipid. It encapsulates, it repels oil. But then he told us, oh, I made it with these, I dissolved the de-oiled lecithin in hexane, and then I precipitated it onto the lysine and methionine using acetone. And we said, oh, it's a great choice, but we can't use these flammable ingredients. It's expensive and it's hazardous. We need something that works without these compounds. So it's back to that innovation process. Here's another step. You know, how do we encapsulate without the solvents? So we tested a number of different things. This that you see spinning is called a silent cutter. It's what's used to make sausage and surimi. And we also tested a regular feed mixer. We tested a twin screw extruder, a granulator, and we found the silent cutter was the most practical and effective. It's not necessarily the best, but it worked. It worked in these trials. And then we put it together. We encapsulated the premix. We put it in feeds. This is at our breeding center in Kauai, where we have a nutrition setup like we did at each of our farms. And we compared to a control diet that had 25% fish meal. So our test diets had no fish meal. And the one with the green bar, let's see, yeah. This is the one that has the encapsulated premix with the feed attractant mixture, and you can see that it performed no significant difference from 25, whoops, I went the wrong way, then 25% protein in the control. Now over here, we have the premix, but without the controlled release, and it was no different than not having the premix at all. So the controlled release part of it, super important. And like I say, it has application much beyond attractant release. So these are the results with with 1% of this feed attractant mixture, it outperformed krill meal in every category: attractability, palatability, growth, but too expensive. So we reduced it to 0.5%, and then it was equivalent. It's equivalent to krill meal, and it's cost effective. It's just the same cost as krill meal. Not a great savings, but perhaps at a larger scale, these raw materials that we were buying, amino acids and so forth, could be purchased much more cost effectively, I'm confident. So at that point in our development, we had not yet scaled up. We had not yet commercialized this. The real test is to take it into commercial field trials and to run it in large-scale farm trials. And we didn't get there. We sold our business. It went to a breeding company. They had no interest in it. We had a patent in process. They chose not to renew the patent. It's all fine, but the project just languished. So now I just want to pass along whatever of these results might be useful to anyone, and I hope that you can advance it further. And let me mention another spinoff. It occurred to us that attractants are what it's all about when it comes to fishing for crabs and lobster. Crabs, imagine king crabs or blue crabs. And we read in the literature that 18 million tons of, small fish are used as bait for these, for these crustaceans. So we tried putting our controlled release compound into a carrier, and we chose to use whole soybeans soybeans are an undenatured protein. It's a native protein, and when they're cooked, just like an egg, they set. And we felt that would be a very good carrier for this controlled release compound. And so we made some. We tested them with blue crabs and lobster. With lobster, it tended to attract the small lobster. And Chuck Derby, our olfactory guy, says, well, we optimize this for shrimp. Lobster eat more fish. We don't have many fish attractant compounds. The point is that anytime you work with baits, you have to think about customizing your feed attractant mixture for that particular species. But it's an opportunity. So I want to end by acknowledging the guys who worked on this with me over the years: Victor Suresh, Dr. Kumara Guru, Sergio Nates, Charles Shasteen, Chuck Derby, and Anant Bharadwaj. And then I want to end by showing you a little video of this upcoming conference that we're going to have in India. And the reason is a little bit different. We're all talking about replacing krill meal, but there's another way of improving feed management, especially at the small farm level. And there have been these enormous advances of using digital technology to improve feed conversion at the farm level. And we'll be demonstrating it at this conference. And I would love for any of you who can to attend, go on the field trip, etc. So here we go. It's going to be in Chennai, India. This ITC Grand Chola, by the way, is LEED Platinum certified, 0 carbon emissions. This is the tour of facilities that we did last year at Shrimp Summit. It'll be similar this year. Last year we focused on intensive technology. This year it'll be on smallholder. And this group, Aqua Exchange, is one of the leading digital technology companies that's really making a big difference. And the project that we're working on in India is in conjunction with the Nature Conservancy and funded by the Walmart Foundation. So anyway, that's it for me. Thank you very much for your attention.